that, for instance, is mace. There's long pepper. There's something strange, which is called dragon's blood, which looks a little bit like coral. And that was used for probably sprinkling on wounds. It's red, a bit like coral, and therefore by one popular way of deciding what a medicine was good for, if it's red, it was probably intended to be good for the blood. Apart from kidney complaints, as I said, you get a lot for a lot of ointments, a lot of different things for the eyes, and perhaps most of all for the stomach. They seem to have needed a lot to cure indigestion and colic.
We have weaned the baby. Do not ask me what we suffer for him. Trouble, crying, sleepless nights. So much so that the neighbors, God is my witness, are complaining. We incur great expenses for him. The doctor, medicines, and 2 chickens every day.
And as with eye diseases, of course, indigestion and colic of many kinds are still quite prevalent in that part of the world.
This is a letter of a man who was a businessman and who traveled to India to do business. Now, this matter of the India trade is one of the most important discoveries of the Geniza. Columbus came to discover America for really as a result of his search for a trade route to India. Much before him, much before Columbus, hundreds of years before him, there was a very active trade of merchants, Jewish and Arab merchants, who traveled from the Mediterranean area to India. In these 2 pieces of letters that I have here, little fragments, there is described how a man, a dedicated husband, writes to his wife from far away and tries to tell her that he still loves her, and that he constantly thinks of her, and he thinks about the time they spent together. So here in these 2 little fragments, pieced together, you have a kind of a human glimpse into the relationship and into the life of a businessman who in the 11th century or in the 12th century leaves his native home and goes on business to India.
Your dear letters have arrived after I had been without mail from you for a long time. I was filled with joy even before I opened them, but then my mind became troubled for fear of bad news, heaven forbid. Also, I had other doubts that maybe you would not write to me if you really did have bad news in order not to worry me. In fact, there were some lines in your letter which brought me concern, especially where you speak about our being apart for so long. By the Almighty, I'm just as lonely as you are. I miss you so much that I can hardly speak. The worst time, my darling, is on Friday nights, when I light the Sabbath candle and eat my simple meal. That's when I long for you the most, and only God Almighty knows the depth of my feelings.
We also have another letter written in the distinctive hand of Moses Maimonides, the famous physician and philosopher who came to Egypt from the Muslim West. He's writing a letter of recommendation. In this letter, he requests the addressee to be so kind as to help
Isaac Adarhi, the bearer of this letter, for he's an acquaintance of ours. So tell the Haver to entrust his problem to the community so that the poll tax can be collected among yourselves on his behalf, for he and his son Moises are now owing 2 installments of the tax.
Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, Moses Maimonides, was not only a famous scholar, not only a leading rabbi and teacher among the Jews, but was also venerated by the Muslims. He was born in Spain in 1135, but because of persecution, fled with his family to North Africa. Here, Islamic fanaticism still did not permit him to lead a peaceful life, and after a visit to the Holy Land, he finally made his home in Cairo. His brother had helped to support the family, but perished while on a voyage in the Indian Ocean on an expedition conducting his business affairs. Maimonides is not only a famous rabbinic authority and codifier, but is known to the non-Jewish world too as a leading philosopher and a noted physician.
My duties as a physician to the Sultan are very heavy. I am obliged to visit him early every morning, and whenever he or his harem or his retinue are indisposed. I have no time to eat, and even when I return home, I find patients waiting. Jews, Gentiles, nobles, commoners. Only on the Shabbat can I pursue my religious studies with my fellow Jews.
Another very endearing example of the light that Geniza has shed on the relationships within the family is this beautiful letter written by a mother to her son. It is unlikely that the woman herself wrote this letter, although we do have examples of women who were quite learned and knew how to read and write and were even familiar with the scriptures and Talmud. But it was more probable that the woman had a professional scribe to write this letter for her. Indeed, the general calligraphical aspect of it suggests this. She starts off the letter by saying, "Kitabi ya waladi a'az al-khalq alayya," which means, "This is my letter to you, my son,
the most precious of creatures for me. I have not received any news from you for a long time now. I cannot eat, but fast, and pray to God through night until morning that he protect you. Send me something, even your soiled shirts, so that I can have something of yours to revive my spirit."
Shortly after my appointment at the research unit in 1978, I undertook a journey to Egypt, familiarizing myself with the localities connected with Geniza and its discovery. Since this was a little while before the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, I was probably the first person from the outside within 30 years to have visited these places. The synagogue came into the possession of the Jews when the Coptic patriarch was obliged to sell it in 882 in order to repay a debt that he owed the ruler of Egypt at that time, Ibn Tulun. The Islamic ruling was that the buildings that existed at the rise of Islam had to be protected, and this is probably one of the reasons why it was never destroyed. The synagogue survived for centuries, and it was only in the 19th century that, because of the poor repair in which the building was, extensive renovation was carried out. And it is at this time that the documents of the Geniza came to the surface. The synagogue is in the neighborhood of some very ancient Coptic churches. It has been included in the normal tourist circuit even during the period of the Israel-Arab conflict. Thus, the synagogue is permanently open to the public from 9 to 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and this, I gather, has been the case for many years. The interior of the building, which has not been used for religious services for over 30 years, remains much as the same as it was when abandoned at that time. Dust is everywhere, and the edifice is poorly lit. Many precious books are piled in the bookcases, and the walls are adorned with Kabbalistic amulets, the antiquity of which is greatly exaggerated by the local guides. The interior of the synagogue is beautifully decorated with wood paneling, inlaid with arabesques of ivory and mother of pearl. At the same time, my journey took me to the Basatin cemetery, which is roughly 5 miles east of Fustat and 10 miles south of Cairo. The cemetery itself is a formidable sight. As you approach it from afar, it looks like a sprawling city. In fact, it's called the City of the Dead. Some of the more affluent families built shrines over their beloved departed, which look like houses from afar. The most prominent of which is that housing the mortal remains of Rabbi Haim Kapusi, who was a celebrated saint and erudite rabbi of the Cairo community, who departed this life in 1631. Rabbi Chaim